Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula. Now we're going to start off by trying to think of all the ways that we've previously learned to solve a quadratic equation. Two of those that we've already talked about are solving by factoring and solving by graphing. Solving by factoring, where we factor and then set each of our terms equal to 0. Graphing, where we graph and then see where we pass 0. The other one, for solving without a b value, if we had something like x squared minus 1 is equal to 0, is we move the 1 over and we take the square root. So that's the square root. And those are the three methods we have, except for the one we're learning today. Because how do you solve something like this by factoring? We're looking for an ACB chart, so factors of a times c, or 1, that add up to 4. And the only things we get are 1 and 1, but those will add up to 2. So we're not going to have easy answers here. If we tried to graph this, we'd see these wouldn't cross at exact lines. This is where the quadratic formula comes in. The quadratic formula is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And this is, of course, assuming that y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. But Mr. Ridley, I hear you saying, how are we supposed to remember this? This is just way too long and way too hard to learn. Well, I'll give you a hint. We have a song for it. Some of you may already know this, some of you may not, but here's how the song goes. It goes, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So just remember that song, sing it as many times as you want, and you'll remember the quadratic formula as well. Now, how do we use the quadratic formula? Let's go ahead and go through this. The first step, like always, is we're going to need to get one side equal to 0. Meaning that we're going to have to subtract the 3 in this equation. So this would become 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 is equal to 0. Super important that we set this equal to 0. The next step is going to be put into the quadratic formula. Now let's take a look. What are each of our coefficients? A is going to be 2, B is going to be minus 5, and 3 is going to be C, or minus 3 is going to be C. So let's write that down. We have A is 2, B is minus 5, and C is minus 3. Meaning that when we put this in, this is going to be x is equal to negative b, and b is negative 5, so negative negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4a, which is 2c, all over 2a. So a lot there, but here is what we have. X is equal to negative b, negative negative 5, plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Step 3 is going to be simplify. So now we're going to reduce this. Negative negative 5 is going to be positive 5. So this is x is equal to positive 5 plus or minus the square root. 25 is negative 5 squared. Negative 5 times negative 5, remember, we don't have that negative. Minus 4 times 2 times minus 3. So minus 4 times minus 3 is going to give us a positive number. And this is going to be positive 12 times 2. 4 times 3 being 12 times 2. So that's going to give us plus 24 all over 2 times 2 is going to be 4. Where this is going to be 5 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 4. So that's pretty simplified. Square root of 49 is 7, so that's going to be our last step, is to reduce that to 7. Then step 4 is going to be split this equation apart and solve. Because we have a plus and a minus, we need to split this up and solve it. So our first one is going to be x is equal to 5 plus 7 over 4, or that's going to be, let's see, 12 over 4, or 3. And the other one's going to be x is equal to 5 minus 7 over 4. 5 minus 7 being minus 2. Minus 2 over 4 is going to be 1/2. So this is a little messy, but at the end our answers are x is equal to 3 and x is equal to minus 1/2. So this is the basic process, but we have a couple of common mistakes we want to look out for, a couple of things to make sure you're remembering to do. Number 1, let's do that in black. Number 1 is remember to square root. So if you end up getting something like 3 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 2, remember to take the square root. This isn't 3 plus 25, this is 3 plus 5. 3 plus or minus 5 over 2. So that's our first common mistake. The second common mistake is going to be not doing the opposite of b. So to remember to flip the sign of b. So in the beginning, it's x is equal to negative b, plus or minus the square root and all that. But it's minus b over here, meaning that if we have b is going to be minus 3, we're going to have to flip the sign. Right? If b is positive 3, we're going to have to flip the sign. Either way, we're going to have to remember to flip the sign of b. And then finally, the last thing we need to remember is remember to multiply negatives together. So this is when we're talking about the b squared minus 4ac. Minus 4ac. If a or c is negative, then this term is going to come out to be positive because we have minus a negative. So we have to remember to keep track of our negatives inside of this term. All right, we're going to do a little bit of rational remediation. Got to make sure you remember how to simplify a radical before we start doing radicals more. And how do we do this? Well, we take the number inside of the radical. So in this case, we're going to take 1080, and we're going to start dividing this by prime numbers. So we're going to start dividing by 2 until we run out of things to divide by 2. Let's divide 1080 by 2. That's going to leave us with 540. We're going to divide 540 by 2. We're going to see, what does that get us? Well, that gets us 270. If we divide 270 by 2, what do we get? We're going to get 135. And if we try to divide 135 by 2, we can't. Right? 135 is not divisible by 2, meaning we're going to continue on to our next largest prime, which is going to be 3. So let's try dividing 135 by 3. 135 divided by 3 gives us 45. Let's divide by 3 again. That's going to get us to 15. Let's divide 15 by 3. We're going to be left with 5. And now, nothing left divisible by 3, so we're going to move to our next largest prime, which is 5. 5 divided by 5 gives us 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the number at the very top. We're going to keep dividing by prime numbers until we get all the way down to having a 1 on the right-hand side. Then what we're going to do is we're going to pair these up. So we have 2 2s here. Those are a pair. We have 2 3s here. Those are a pair. Anything that's paired a single one of those will go on the outside. So this is going to be a 2 on the outside, and this is going to be a 3 on the outside. All the other numbers stay inside, meaning that when we do this, to simplify, the square root of 1080 is going to be equal to 2, because we pulled out a 2, we pulled out a 3, and we're left with the square root of whatever remains. So whatever remains, we have a 2 here, we have a 3, and we have a 5. So this is going to be 2 times 3 times, or the square root of 2 times 3 times 5. And when we simplify this, 2 times 3 is going to be 6. And we're going to have the square root of 2 times 3, which is going to be 6 times 5. So this is going to be 6 square root of 30. Now, if you don't believe me that these two are the same, put both of these into your calculator. The square root of 1080 will give you 32.863, roughly, and 6 times the square root of 30 will give you 32.863, roughly. So these two are the same. What happens if we have a number outside like here? Well, we're still going to do the decomposition. We're going to break down the 20 on the inside. So we're going to start by dividing by 2. 20 divided by 2 gives us 10. 10 divided by 2 gives us 5. We can't divide that by 3, so we're not going to. But 5 divided by 5 gives us 1. We're all the way back down to a 1 here. Now we have a pair of 2's here, so we're going to pull out a 2. And we're left with a 5 on the inside. So 5 square root of 20 is going to be equal to, we're going to leave the 5 here, but we also pull out a 2, so this is going to be 5 times 2. So any numbers you pull out get multiplied to whatever is already on the outside, square root of 5, where this is going to be 10 root 5. Right. Go ahead and do one on your own. What is the square root of 30 reduced? Square root of 30, if we put 30 on the top here, is going to be, divide by 2 to get 15. 15 we can divide by 3, so that's going to give us 5. And 5 divided by 5 will give us 1. Now we don't have any pairs here, meaning we can't pull anything out. That means our solution to this one is the square root of 30. So these are our answers: 6 root 30, 10 root 5, and the square root of 30. Now that we have that out of the way, let's try a couple of quadratic formula problems. We're going to start out with this first one. I'm going to walk us through this. We get x squared plus 1x is equal to 6. Step 1 was to set one side equal to 0. So this becomes x squared plus x minus 6 is equal to 0. A in this case is 1, B is 1, and C is minus 6. So now we're going to put this into our quadratic formula. We get x is equal to negative b, negative 1, plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times minus 6 all over 2 times 1, or 2. Let's keep simplifying this. We get x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus 4 times minus 6 is going to give us plus 24. So this is what I'm saying. We have to keep track of our negatives in here. Minus 4 times minus 6 gives us plus 24 over 2. Or this is the same thing as negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 2. And the square root of 25 is going to be 5. So our two possible answers are x is equal to minus 1 plus 5 over 2. Or that minus 1 plus 5 is 4 over 2. So this is going to be 2. The second one is going to be x is equal to minus 1 minus 5 over 2. And minus 1 minus 5 gives us negative 6. Negative 6 over 2 is minus 3. Those are our two answers. Let's quickly go ahead and do problem 2 as well before letting you do a couple. Problem 2, we already have this all good to go, so we know that A is 3, B is 7, and C is 6. So when we multiply this, we get x is equal to negative 7 plus or minus the square root of b squared, 7 squared, minus 4 times a times c, and c is 6, all over 2 times 3. So in this case, it's going to be minus 7 plus or minus the square root of 49 minus 4 times 3 times 6 is going to give us minus 72, all over 6. And it looks like we're going to run into an issue here because we have minus 7 plus or minus 49 minus 72 is negative 23. And how do we take the square root of a negative? We don't know how to take the square root of a negative, meaning that we don't have an answer for this. Our answer is that there are no real solutions. So anytime you see a negative square root, your answer is going to be no real solutions. Right. Let's have you all try 3. What are the answers going to be for 3? For 3, we're going to add 9 over, so this becomes x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. A is 1, b is 6, and c is 9. So this is going to become x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, 6 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times 1. Or in other words, this is going to be minus 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 36 over 2. So we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. And the square root of 0 is just 0. So minus 6 plus and minus 0 is the same. Our answer is just minus 6 over 2 or minus 3. So remember, it's okay to have one answer when we're solving for a quadratic as well. Let's have you do one more here. Let's have you do problem 4. For this one, a is 2, b is minus 6, and c is 1. So x is going to be equal to negative b, so negative negative 6, plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, all over 2 times 2, or 2a. So that's going to be negative negative 6 is positive 6, plus or minus the square root, and negative squared will always be positive. So this is 36 minus 4 times 2, so 8, all over 4. Or that's going to be 6 plus or minus the square root. 36 minus 8 is going to give us 28. It's going to give us, 28 over 4. And from here, we're going to have to do that division to figure out what we can pull out of 28. 28 divided by 2 will give us 14. 14 divided by 2 will give us 7. And we divide by 7 to get to 1. So square root of 28 is the same thing as 2 root 7. So this is going to be equal to 6 plus or minus 2 root 7 over 4. Now because we have the radical here, we can't really simplify this. What we can do is we can pull out a 2 from everything on the top and divide that by the bottom. So if we factor out a 2, we get 2 over 4 times 6 divided by 2 is 3 plus or minus root 7. So our answer is going to be 1/2 times 3 plus or minus root 7, or 3 plus or minus root 7 over 2. Right. That's our basics of solving using the quadratic formula. But we have one extra part to go with it. It's called the discriminant. And what the discriminant is the part inside the square root. The square root, or this is going to be b squared minus 4ac. And the discriminant is useful because we can use it to determine how many answers our equation will have without ever doing the quadratic formula. So if our discriminant is positive, if it is greater than 0, then we know we will have two solutions. Because we have a plus some square root and a minus some square root. If our discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, is equal to 0, then we know we have one solution. This is like problem 3, where we ended up with the square root of 0. Square root of 0 is just 0, so we will only have one answer. And the final one is if our discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, is negative, or it's less than 0, then we have no solutions because we can't take the square root of a negative number. Then we have, and we're going to call this 0 real solutions, because we'll be learning in just a little bit about non-real numbers. So let's go ahead and do a practice, and then let's have you do a practice. We're using the discriminant to determine how many solutions this has. So our discriminant is going to be b squared minus 4ac. Or this is going to be 4 squared minus 4 times 4 times 1. Or 16 minus 16, this is going to be equal to 0. When we look back up at this chart, our discriminant is 0, so we have one solution. How many solutions will we have for problem 2? Go ahead and try for yourself. For this one, b squared minus 4ac. b is minus 8, so this is minus 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. Or this is 64 minus 20. 64 minus 20 is definitely positive, so we're going to get two solutions. And that, folks, is all we have for quadratic formula.